recently accused The Last of Us, an incredibly popular HBO show, of having an anti-Christian bias.
HBO series The Last of Us.
The Last of Us. The Last of Us.
The Last of Us is one of the most anticipated TV shows that I can remember of the last few years. People are really hungry for this. They're clamoring for it.
As even actor Rainn Wilson speaks of the anti-Christian bias in Hollywood.
Have you heard in this clip? Actor Rainn Wilson blasted Hollywood's anti-Christian attitude, citing a recent instance from the HBO show The Last of Us. The former Office cast member took to Twitter to criticize a recent episode of the show for including a wicked character who used Bible passages in what he called a conventional pattern. Now, one thing that Rainn Wilson has pointed out about the Hollywood industry is that there are certain beings who do not like Christianity to that extent and rather hate it.
I fucking hate Jesus.
Why do you hate Jesus?
He does not real.
He's not real?
No, he's not real.
Why is he not real?
Now, this is something exactly what has been mentioned in Matthew chapter 24, verse 9, which says that there will come a time when Christians will be facing times of persecution simply because of the fact that they are Christians. Matthew chapter 24, verse 9. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. We will dive deep into those details about how things will be like for the Christians in the times of persecution and what they are supposed to do in those times. But first, let us discuss this show. What is and how is it promoting an anti-Christian agenda? The Last of Us is a show based on the video game of the same title. It features a tribe of cannibals led by what appear to be a Christian pastor. The group rationalized their conduct by quoting Bible texts, and a subsequent scene showed the preacher attempting to sexually assault Ellie, the series protagonist, who is a young girl in the show and even uses a Bible to justify his actions. Now, because of all this, the famous actor wrote in his tweet, "I do think there's an anti-Christian bias in Hollywood. As soon as the David character in The Last of Us started reading from the Bible, I knew he was going to be a horrific villain. Could there be a Bible-reading preacher on the show who is actually the loving kind?" Several agreed with Wilson's statement, pointing out that The Last of Us was certainly not the first instance of Hollywood's anti-Christian bias. "But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who prosecute you." Matthew chapter 4, verse 44. The president of Libre Initiative, Daniel Garza, remarked in his tweet that the defamation of Christianity has become one of the most old and familiar motifs in films and television shows. He added that its predominance is intended to discredit faith and portray the secular-minded as the only ones with humanitarian motives, rather than prejudice against an entire population. "By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." John chapter 13, verse 35. The New Christendom Press CEO Eric Kahn tweeted on the same subject that it seems like it returns to Mr. Collins in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. The religious man is almost often represented negatively. This is also applicable to Hollywood today. Brittany Martinez, who is the founder and editor-in-chief of Evie magazine, while giving her thoughts on the same matter, said that she suspected he was going to be bad as soon as he started reading from the Bible. She also added that she had recognized the person as David, who was a terrifying cannibal in the video game. She said that she was shocked when she saw that, and she didn't think it would come out like this. The character that she referred to, as in her opinion, was not a pastor. Wilson is not the only individual to bring up the topic of anti-Christian bias in Hollywood in recent weeks. A few weeks ago, Kelsey Grammer was on a press trip for Jesus Revolution, and multiple news sites reported that he won't apologize for his beliefs. Similarly, Mark Wahlberg remarked in February that he cannot deny his beliefs, although it isn't very much popular in the industry. It seems like many people have agreed with Rainn Wilson on how Hollywood is trying to paint an image in people's minds about the Christians and Christianity. Now, Wilson himself is not a Christian, but a follower of the Baha'i faith. The people who follow this faith acknowledge all world faiths and religions and show equal respect to their messengers and prophets. While he does not practice Christianity, he clarified his previous statements calling for religious fairness, saying that most Christians he knows are kind, accepting, and loving, and they want to contribute to making the world a better place. He also mentioned that those Christians who are trying their very best in doing so should be acknowledged in the media as well. Now, if we look closely at the end times events and signs, we will see that something similar will happen in the end of times as well. People will largely reject God's restriction norms. Human behavior that is unconstrained by God's law will nearly completely destroy the planet. After all, first knowledge is knowledge of God. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. Matthew chapter 24, verse 12. However, Jesus also prophesies that some people, a relatively tiny group, would refuse to embrace lawlessness. In fact, these individuals will be characterized by the polar opposite, lawfulness. They will live their lives in accordance with God's rule. By this we know we love the children of God, when we love God and keep His commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not grievous. 1 John chapter 5 verse 2 through 3. So while the love of God's society turns cold, God's faithful will uphold the law that promotes affection, tenderness, and concern for others. It's also mentioned in Matthew chapter 24 that when Jesus was asked about the end times and the signs of His coming, He predicted not just wars, hunger, and earthquakes, but also increased persecution, particularly when His return neared. Now, this prophecy appears to be in the process of being fulfilled today. As we look around what's going on, and especially with what's happening with Christianity, we really need to think and ask ourselves if this is the time for us to do something about it. Today, there is a significant upsurge in Christian persecution. Many corporations and governments are also expressing a willingness to suppress free speech and punish those who have opinions that vary from their own. Indeed, many conservatives have abandoned major social media platforms, fearing that their political or religious comments will be banned. And all of this is intensifying as end-of-the-world prophecy is being fulfilled. The demeanor of the Antichrist is obvious, and the increase of unjust control is one of the signs that the Antichrist and his terrible reign of terror is approaching. The Bible really foretells persecution and suffering as a result of our religion. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will also keep yours. John chapter 15 verse 20. The world has turned against God. It despises God. And when He appeared as a man in the person of Jesus Christ, the world murdered Him. Jesus predicted that the world will treat us in the same way that it treated Him. In this way, Christians' comfortable experience in the West has been an exception. Western Christians have been mostly left alone for their beliefs as a result of Western civilization's Christian background, paired with democratic liberties and the traditional rule of law. Even now, as Western nations grow more anti-Christian, most Christians face opposition that is little more than ridicule. If this trend continues, Western Christians will find themselves in the same situation as their brothers and sisters around the world. But this suffering will not be permanent, as promised by Jesus Christ. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. Revelations chapter 2 verse 10 through 11, which refers not only to eternal life, but to the redemption of Christians from persecution as well as being Christians. There is some good news for us as well. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him. James chapter 1 verse 12. So as believers, what should we be doing? As believers, we must take a stand for the Lord and diligently serve Him. We must not submit to dread or any other form of control used by the devil to keep us from devoutly serving and loving God. As a major end-time religious deceit about which Jesus warned will be a type of fake Christianity, we must remain faithful to our beliefs. And at the same time, we should be ready for everything, not just physically, but more importantly, spiritually. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed today's video, then make sure to leave us a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to keep up with the most exciting content. Thanks for watching. See you again soon in another video.